There's a memory you have, probably several of them, that feel absolutely certain. Not just remembered, certain. The kind where you could close your eyes right now and almost be back there. You can see the light in the room, which window it came from, whether it was morning or evening, whether it was sharp or diffused. You can feel something of the temperature in the air. You know what someone was wearing. You can hear their voice saying the particular thing they said in that particular tone. The memory arrives in your mind not as a guess or an approximation, but as something solid, something that simply happened, preserved exactly the way it was. And the science of memory says that feeling of certainty tells you almost nothing about whether the memory is accurate. Not because your mind is broken, not because there is something unusual about you, but because that is how memory works in every brain, in every person, all the time. The feeling of remembering and the accuracy of remembering are almost completely unrelated. Vivid feels true. Emotional feels reliable. Certain feels like it must mean the thing really happened exactly that way. None of those are proof. This is one of the most disorienting findings in all of cognitive science, because memory doesn't feel like a process. It doesn't feel like something your brain is actively doing in the moment of recall. It feels like a window, like looking directly at something that is simply there, preserved and real and unchanged. The past, when you reach for it, seems solid. But it isn't solid, and understanding what it actually is, what is happening inside your brain each time you remember something, and why that process is so much stranger and so much more interesting than it appears from the inside, changes something about how you relate to your own history. Not in a way that should frighten you, in a way that might, over time, make you a little gentler with yourself and a little more honest about the stories you carry. Tonight, we are going to take this slowly. There is no rush here, and nothing you need to hold on to. The science of memory is vast and genuinely strange, and it deserves to be explored at a pace that lets things settle before the next thing arrives. Get comfortable. We'll begin at the very beginning. A photograph is the model most people would reach for if you ask them to describe how memory works. A photograph captures a scene as it exists at a single moment, freezes it, preserves it, holds it in place. When you look at it again years later, the image is exactly as it was. The colors have faded maybe. Some chemical deterioration has occurred, but the image itself is unchanged. What was captured is what remains. The photograph does not reinterpret itself each time you look at it. It does not adjust what it shows based on what you now know about the people in it, or what has happened to them since. It simply holds the moment. Most people, if you ask them to describe how memory works, would reach for something like this. You experience something. The experience is captured and preserved somewhere in the brain. When you need it later, you retrieve it, press play, and it comes back. Maybe it fades a little over time, the way photographs soften at the edges. Maybe certain details become harder to pull up. But the original, whatever was recorded when it happened, is there somewhere inside you, waiting intact for the moment you reach for it. This model is completely wrong. Not imprecise in ways that don't matter much in practice. Not a useful simplification that breaks down only in edge cases. Fundamentally, architecturally, in its most basic assumptions, wrong. And understanding exactly how it is wrong is the foundation for everything else we will talk about tonight. Memory is not recording. Memory is reconstruction. And the difference between those two things is not a small one. It is the difference between finding something that was already there and building it from pieces every single time you remember. Here is what actually happens when a memory forms. An experience unfolds around you. As it unfolds, your brain begins encoding it, taking in the information and representing it in patterns of neural activation. But it doesn't encode the experience as a unified whole, the way a camera captures a scene. It breaks it apart. The visual elements get processed by visual cortex regions and encoded there. The emotional weight gets tagged by the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in the brain that acts as a significance detector. The narrative of the experience, who was there, what happened in what sequence, where you were, gets handled primarily by the hippocampus. The sounds go to auditory processing regions. The smells go somewhere else. The physical sensations each get routed to distributed cortical regions. The experience is stored in pieces, scattered across the brain, not in any single location, not in any unified file. When you later remember that experience, you are not retrieving a file. You are reconstructing it, sending out signals that pull those distributed pieces back together and reassemble them into something that feels, from the inside, like a coherent replay of what happened. The reconstruction is remarkably fast and remarkably convincing. It arrives in consciousness already assembled, already fluid. It feels like a memory, not like a construction. But it is a construction every time. The neuroscientist Daniel Schachter has spent decades studying memory and imagination together. And one of his central observations is how similar these two processes actually are. Both involve bringing into conscious experience something that isn't physically present. Both involve the brain generating an internal representation from stored components, filling in gaps, producing something vivid from materials that are distributed and partial. The machinery they use is nearly identical. What differs, in theory, is that memory is supposed to be reconstructing something that was real, while imagination is constructing something that was not. But the tools don't know the difference. They just build the most coherent thing they can from whatever is available. This is why memory feels so real. The mechanism that produces memories is the same one that produces your most vivid imaginings, and those feel real too while they're happening. Now Now stay with this for a moment, because there is something in it that goes beyond the abstract. Because reconstruction is an active process rather than a passive playback, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Every time you pull those memory fragments back together, you are doing it from inside your present moment. Who you are right now, your current beliefs, your current emotional state, your understanding of yourself and the people in your life, everything you have experienced and learned in all the time since the original event. All of that is present in the reconstruction. It shapes what gets emphasized. It fills in the gaps that incomplete encoding left behind. What comes back is not the original experience. It is your current brain's best reconstruction of the original experience, filtered through everything you have become since then. Take a moment with that, because it means your memories are not frozen in the past. They are living things, continuous with the present, connected to who you are becoming. The memory you have of something that happened 15 years ago is not the same as the memory that formed 15 years ago. It has been rebuilt, revised, and reshaped every time you have returned to it. Each rebuilding filtered through a slightly different version of you. Each rebuilding introducing small shifts in emphasis, small revisions to what matters. You have no way of knowing how different the memory you now hold is from the original experience. You only ever have the latest reconstruction, and it feels exactly as solid and real as the original ever did. In any significant argument with someone you love, the kind that left both of you certain you were right, you carry a memory of what was said. They carry a memory of what was said. Both memories feel solid. Both feel like direct access to what actually happened. And they tell different stories. Neither of you is lying. Neither of you is working from a corrupted copy of the same file. You are both working from a reconstruction. Two reconstructions of the same event, built by two different brains with two different emotional histories and two different stakes in how the story goes. This is where the reconstruction model reaches you personally, not in courtrooms, not in academic journals, but in the ordinary experience of being certain about something that mattered, and discovering that certainty is not the same as accuracy. But it also means that the certainty you feel about what you remember is not a reliable guide to what actually happened. Those are two different things, and understanding that, really sitting with it rather than just nodding at it, changes something about how you hold your own past, and something about how you hold other people's versions of theirs. Before a memory can be misremembered, it has to be incompletely encoded. And encoding is where the first significant limitations enter, before you've even walked away from the experience. There is probably a conversation that comes to mind immediately, a recent one where something significant was said, something that mattered. The substance of it is likely clear. The emotional weight of it is probably still present. But the detail, the exact words, the precise sequence, whether the significant moment came early or late, what the other person's face was doing. That is likely less certain than the feeling of certainty suggests. Some of what feels like memory is the actual event. Some of it is the story told in the hours and days after. Encoding is what happens in the moment of experience itself. As events unfold around you, your brain takes them in and begins representing them in neural patterns. And from the very first instant, this process is selective. Your brain cannot and does not encode everything. It makes choices, constantly, automatically, without your awareness, about what to represent richly and what to let pass. The most powerful determinant of what gets encoded is attention. What you are paying attention to gets encoded. What falls outside the focus of your attention gets encoded weakly, or not at all. This sounds obvious, but its implications run deeper than they initially appear. Two people at the same difficult dinner conversation, a moment of tension, something both of them will remember, are in the same room, hearing the same words, under the same light. And yet, one person's attention is on the speaker's face, reading the emotional signals there, the slight tightening around the eyes, the hesitation before a word. The other person's attention is on the content, tracking the argument and its logic. One notices that someone across the table looked uncomfortable. The other doesn't register that at all. Their memories of this event will diverge, not because either of them is lying or failing to remember accurately, but because they encoded genuinely different things from the same moment. Each memory will be, in its own terms, a reasonable record of what that person was actually attending to. But they will tell different stories about what happened. And both people will feel certain their account is correct. This is the first and most fundamental source of the discrepancies that arise between people who share the same events. They are not working from corrupted copies of the same file. They encoded different information from the beginning. Emotion adds another layer to encoding in ways that are both helpful and consistently misunderstood. The amygdala sits in close anatomical proximity to the hippocampus, and when something is emotionally charged, it flags it. This matters. Encode this carefully. Emotionally significant experiences get encoded more deeply than neutral ones. They are more reliably remembered in the sense of being remembered at all. But strong emotion also narrows the field of attention in ways that distort the quality of what gets encoded. Under intense emotional arousal, attention focuses with tunnel-like intensity on whatever the brain has identified as most immediately relevant, usually whatever is most threatening, most surprising, most emotionally central. The peripheral details, the things that sit adjacent to the emotional core of the experience, either don't get encoded at all or get encoded shallowly. Researchers studying eyewitness memory have found this pattern so consistently it has its own name, the weapons focus effect. A person who witnesses a robbery often remembers the weapon with extraordinary precision, the specific make, the way it was held, the distance from their body. and they remember almost nothing about the person holding it. Not the face, not the height, not what they were wearing. The gun was at the emotional center of the experience. The face was peripheral. The brain made a real-time triage decision about where to allocate its encoding resources. And that decision was driven by what was most threatening, not by what would later be most useful. The memories you feel most certain about, the argument where everything was said, the diagnosis that changed things, the moment something significant became clear about someone you loved. Those are exactly the moments where encoding was most narrowed. What sits at the center of those memories may have been encoded with genuine fidelity, but everything at the edges may have been missed almost entirely. And when you reconstruct the memory, the brain fills in those edges with what seems most plausible, what seems consistent with the center, with the emotional weight, with everything else you know. The filled-in details feel like memory too. There is no internal signal distinguishing what you actually perceived from what your brain has since added to make the reconstruction cohere. At the time you walk away from any significant experience, you are already carrying a partial and somewhat shaped representation. Not because something went wrong, because encoding is always partial and always shaped by what you were attending to in the moment, by what was emotionally salient, by what the brain judged worth representing carefully. The reconstruction you build later will be built on that partial foundation, and it will feel complete because the brain makes it feel complete, even though it was never complete to begin with. This is worth remembering the next time you feel absolutely certain about what happened. Certainty doesn't come from completeness of encoding. It comes from the coherence of the reconstruction. And coherence, unfortunately, is something the brain produces whether or not the raw materials fully support it. After encoding comes a process that most people know almost nothing about, and which is quietly doing some of the most important memory work of your entire life during the hours when you think you are simply resting. You have probably noticed that the world looks different after you haven't slept. Not just that you feel slow or irritable, the actual quality of your experience changes. Things that you would normally remember don't stick the same way. The conversation from the morning is already hazy by afternoon. The name you heard 3 times is gone. The sequence of events you lived through is somehow already imprecise. You might have attributed this to fatigue, to the difficulty of paying full attention when you're tired. And that is part of it. But only part, because something else is missing too. The processing work that sleep does after encoding, the work that turns fragile new experience into durable long-term memory. Without sleep, encoding can happen. You experience things, you take them in, and then the consolidation that should follow simply doesn't occur. The memory forms, and then it doesn't stabilize, and what remains is weaker and more susceptible to loss than it would have been after a night of adequate sleep. Consolidation is the process by which fresh, fragile memories become stable and durable. Newly encoded memories are vulnerable, they can be disrupted by interfering experiences, by stress, by the simple passage of time without stabilization. Consolidation is the process of taking those vulnerable traces and weaving them into the larger fabric of long-term knowledge. And this process depends, to a degree that took researchers decades to fully appreciate, on sleep. For much of the 20th century, sleep was understood as passive. The brain offline, recovering from the metabolic demands of waking activity. Memory consolidation was thought to be a waking process, driven by rehearsal, by repetition, by the gradual sedimentation of experience over time. Sleep might serve other purposes, but memory was waking business. The research that changed this understanding built slowly through the 1990s and accelerated in the 2000s. Matthew Walker, Robert Stickgold, Jan Bourne, and their colleagues found, with increasing clarity, that sleep is not passive at all. During sleep, specifically during slow-wave sleep and during REM, the hippocampus replays the neural activation patterns of the day's experiences. Not once, hundreds of times. The traces of what you encoded during your waking hours get reactivated repeatedly through the night. And during each reactivation, they get gradually transferred from the hippocampus into more permanent storage in the cortex. This transfer is what consolidation actually is. The hippocampus functions as something like a temporary processing center. It takes in new episodic information, holds it, and over the course of nights and days, gradually passes it to the cortex, where it becomes integrated into the long-term network of everything you know. The cortex is the library. The hippocampus is the intake desk, and the transfer between them happens most efficiently during sleep. In experiment after experiment, participants who learned new material and then slept retained it substantially better than participants who stayed awake through an equivalent period. The improvement is not explained by additional practice or review. Sleeping participants are doing nothing that resembles studying. The improvement is entirely from the consolidation process that sleep enables and waking activity interrupts. This has implications you have probably felt without having a name for them. The things you review or think through just before sleep often feel more available the next morning. Not because nighttime review is more efficient in the moment. It isn't. But because the proximity of sleep following learning gives consolidation the conditions it needs to work. Generations of students have discovered this accidentally. Reviewing material just before sleeping is genuinely better than reviewing it in the middle of the day and then doing other things. But there's also an uncomfortable implication here. When something disrupts your sleep after a significant or stressful experience, when you lie awake for hours after something difficult, when anxiety prevents the deep sleep phases from completing, the consolidation of that experience may be impaired. Details that would have stabilized into durable memory may not. The memory may form less completely than it would have with a full night of sleep. And the gaps that result, as you will see, do not simply remain empty. Sleep researchers have also found that consolidation does more than just stabilize memories. During overnight replay, memories don't get stored in isolation. They get integrated with related existing knowledge. The hippocampus, running its nightly replay, is not just filing away individual memories. It is running them through the cortex, where they make contact with similar experiences, with related conceptual knowledge, with everything the brain already knows that might be relevant. The result is that you sometimes wake up having understood something that was confused the night before, not because you worked on it in your dreams, because the integration work of sleep made connections that weren't available yet when you went to bed. The phrase, "sleep on it," is not just folk wisdom about patience. It is a description of a real cognitive process, one that requires you to stop working and let the system do what it is built to do in the dark. Your sleeping brain is solving problems and building knowledge without your conscious involvement. And tonight, while you rest, it will do the same with whatever you have encountered today. There's also something worth sitting with about what this means for the difficult things, the hard conversations, the moments of grief or loss or uncertainty that you have carried into sleep. The research on emotional memory consolidation suggests that sleep does not simply stabilize negative emotional memories in the same form they arrive. REM sleep, in particular, seems to process emotional memories in a way that preserves the factual content while gradually reducing the acute emotional weight. You remember what happened. The raw ache of it softens. This may be one of the mechanisms by which people heal. Not by forgetting. The memory is still there, but by the emotional processing that sleep performs over nights and weeks and months. The memory stays. The weight of it changes. If you have ever gone to sleep in the middle of something terrible and woken up the next morning and found, to your confusion, that you could breathe a little more easily, not that anything had changed, not that the problem was solved, but that something had shifted, you were experiencing this process. The sleep between you and the difficult thing was doing something real, something the waking mind cannot accomplish on its own, no matter how much it tries to work the problem through. And if you lie awake tonight with something difficult still present at the edges, some unresolved thing that followed you into the dark, let yourself know that even the partial sleep you get is doing this work. The brain is not standing still just because you are not. The most important case in the entire history of memory research was not designed. It was the unintended consequence of surgery performed to treat a different condition entirely. And the man at the center of it became, over the 55 years that followed, the most studied individual in the history of neuroscience. In 1953, a young man named Henry Molaison underwent brain surgery in Hartford, Connecticut. Henry had suffered from severe epilepsy since childhood, seizures so frequent and so debilitating, sometimes 10 per day, that he could barely hold a job or maintain anything resembling a normal life. His surgeon, William Beecher Scoville, proposed removing the hippocampus and the surrounding medial temporal lobe structures bilaterally on both sides of the brain, where the seizures were believed to originate. The surgery worked. Henry's seizures were dramatically reduced. And then, as the anesthesia cleared and the medical team began assessing him in the days that followed, they realized something else had happened. Something they had not anticipated, and for which they had no conceptual framework. Henry could no longer form new memories. Not weakly, not imperfectly, completely. He retained what researchers would later call working memory, the ability to hold information in conscious attention for a brief window, perhaps 30 seconds, long enough to carry a sentence from its beginning to its end, long enough to hold a phone number in mind while dialing. His intelligence was intact. His personality was intact. His general knowledge of the world remained. His memories from before the surgery, his childhood, his parents, his life up to roughly 2 years before the operation were largely accessible. But the moment he stopped actively rehearsing something new, it dissolved. Not faded, dissolved. Gone as completely as if it had never been. Every person he met for the first time, even people who had worked with him every day for years. Every morning, he woke believing it was still 1953. He could not remember having eaten a meal he had just finished. When told that a beloved relative had died, he grieved, genuinely, deeply, and then forgot the conversation. And when told again, he grieved again, from the beginning, as if hearing it for the first time. He described his experience, in rare moments of partial insight, as feeling like waking from a dream. The present moment arrived fully each time, vivid and complete, but without any continuous thread connecting it to anything that had come before. For 55 years, until his death in 2008, Henry, known in the scientific literature as HM, to protect his privacy, was studied by hundreds of researchers across dozens of laboratories. Virtually every major discovery in memory science for half a century was shaped by what his case revealed. Not because it was a curiosity, but because what he could and could not do exposed the architecture of memory that is invisible in healthy brains, where all the systems work together seamlessly. The first major revelation: memory is not one thing. It is multiple systems, each doing something distinct, each housed in different neural structures, each subject to different vulnerabilities. Henry had completely lost episodic memory, the ability to form new memories of specific personal experiences, events located in time and place. This is what most people mean by memory: the record of what has happened to you, the autobiography that accumulates across a life. But he retained semantic memory, his conceptual knowledge of the world, the meanings of words, how things work, historical facts. He could discuss science, understand complex ideas, use language with full facility. This knowledge did not require the hippocampus to access because it had been built long before his surgery and was stored in cortical networks that remained intact. He also retained procedural memory, the physical knowledge encoded in the body through practice. When researchers taught Henry new motor skills, tracing a star pattern while looking only at its mirror reflection, a task that requires significant retraining of hand-eye coordination, his performance improved across sessions. He got measurably better, but each day presented with the task, he had no memory of ever having practiced it. He approached it as if encountering it for the first time. And yet, his hands knew what his conscious mind did not. The things you know how to do, riding a bicycle, typing without looking at the keys, navigating a familiar drive without consciously planning each turn, that knowledge lives somewhere in you that is genuinely different from the way yesterday lives in your mind. Henry's case made this distinction undeniable. They are not two versions of the same thing. They are different kinds of knowing, stored differently, retrieved differently, built on different neural foundations. There is something intimate in that distinction. The things you have practiced so many times that your body simply knows them. Those things can survive losses that would otherwise be devastating. Henry could not tell you who had taught him to trace the star. He could not remember the names of any of the researchers who visited him year after year. But he could do things with his body that he had not been able to do before, accumulated from practice he had no access to. The second thing his case clarified: the hippocampus is not where long-term memories are stored permanently. It is something more like a processing and transfer center, where new episodic memories form and are held in a temporary state while they are gradually moved across weeks and months of sleep and repetition into permanent storage in the cortex. Henry's old memories, the ones formed years before his surgery, had already completed this transfer and were stored in cortical networks that the surgery left intact. New memories formed after had nowhere to go. The intake desk had been removed. The library remained, but nothing new could be shelved. And so he lived in 1953 for 55 years. Every morning that year, every conversation the first, every person a stranger. What he could not do, form new episodic memories, is what we most take for granted about being a continuous self. The sense that the person you are tonight is the same person who lived through yesterday, who made the decisions you've made, who has the history you carry. Henry lost access to that thread. And what his case shows us, among many other things, is how much of what we call identity depends on the quiet, continuous work of the hippocampus, and how much we never notice that work happening until it's gone. Most of us will never experience anything close to what Henry experienced, but there is a version of his situation that is less dramatic and far more common, and his case helps illuminate it. When significant sleep deprivation accumulates, when extreme stress floods the system with hormones that interfere with hippocampal function. When the conditions for memory consolidation are consistently disrupted, episodic memory formation becomes less reliable, not abolished, but impaired in ways that are difficult to notice from the inside, because you cannot remember what you cannot remember. And the distinction Henry's case draws between different types of memory is one that is personally useful to sit with. You have procedural knowledge, things your body knows how to do through repetition. That exists in a genuinely different system from your episodic memories. The way you move through familiar spaces, the way you navigate social situations you have been in many times before, the emotional responses that activate before you have fully processed what triggered them. These are not retrieved from the same place your explicit memories are. They are stored differently, run differently, and are subject to different kinds of influence. Much of what you experience as personality, as character, as who you simply are, is procedural in this deeper sense. Not a story you tell yourself about yourself, not a series of episodic memories of having been a certain way, but knowledge encoded in your responses and your patterns through repetition across thousands of experiences. Henry's hands knew how to trace the star, and in a different but related way, you know things about yourself that run deeper than any story you could tell. The question his case ultimately leaves you with is one of proportion. What parts of who you are depend on the episodic thread, on the continuous narrative of your history? And what parts would remain even if that thread were disrupted? The answer, for most people, is that far more survives than we expect. The essentials are deeper than the stories we tell about them. In the 1880s, a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus undertook one of the most methodical acts of self-experimentation in the history of science. He wanted to study forgetting, how quickly memory decays over time, and what the shape of that decay looks like when measured carefully. The problem was controlling for prior knowledge. Some words are easier to remember than others because they already connect to so much we know. They slot into existing networks and stay there. To study memory decay in something approaching a pure form, he needed material that had no prior associations. So he invented what he called nonsense syllables, three-letter combinations of consonants around a vowel: DAX, BUP, CIM, KAL, chosen specifically because they meant nothing and therefore couldn't ride in on existing knowledge. He memorized list after list of these syllables and tested himself at carefully controlled intervals. After 20 minutes, after an hour, after a day, after a week, he measured not only whether he could recall the lists, but something more subtle: how much faster he could relearn a list he had forgotten compared to learning it from scratch. He called this savings, the time saved by prior exposure, even when explicit recall had failed completely. What emerged from years of this painstaking work became one of the most replicated findings in all of psychology: the forgetting curve. Memory decays rapidly at first, then slows. Within 20 minutes of learning something, without any rehearsal, roughly 40% is gone. Within a day, roughly 70%. Within a week, roughly 80%. And then the curve levels off. What survives a week tends to survive for a very long time. When you first encounter these numbers, they can feel genuinely discouraging. The books you have read over your lifetime and can barely summarize. The languages you studied that have mostly dissolved into a few surviving words. The names of people who were once part of your daily life and have simply slipped away. The things you learned in school that left no visible trace. It can feel like your brain is a leaky vessel, constantly taking in and constantly losing. But the savings measure complicates this picture in an important way. When Ebbinghaus returned to a list he had completely forgotten, one from which he could retrieve absolutely nothing consciously, he still relearned it substantially faster than he had learned it originally. Even when explicit recall had failed entirely, something had remained, not accessible, not retrievable, but present, a shadow of the original encoding that made returning to the material easier than beginning from scratch. This suggests that forgetting is not pure erasure. It is more like archiving, moving information from an accessible state to a less accessible one without deleting it entirely. The trace is there somewhere. What has changed is how easily it can be found. And this has a practical implication worth sitting with. The languages you studied and abandoned are not gone in the way that things are simply gone. They are present in a less accessible state, and returning to them, even years later, will go faster than starting from scratch ever did. The mathematics you learned and stopped using, the instrument you played and put down, the knowledge is not simply missing from you. It is archived somewhere in the system, and the work of recovery is easier than the work of original acquisition was. More recent research has revealed something even more interesting about why we forget it all. Paul Franklin and his colleagues have been studying the relationship between memory and neurogenesis, the ongoing generation of new neurons in the hippocampus, a process that continues throughout adult life. What they found was initially surprising. New neurons, as they integrate into existing hippocampal circuits, actively disrupt and destabilize older memory patterns. The arrival of new cellular architecture physically overwrites what was stored in the old architecture. Why would a memory system be built to undo its own previous storage? If remembering things is useful, why does the brain actively cause forgetting? Franklin's argument is that forgetting serves generalization. Specific episodic memories, this exact meal on this exact evening, the particular texture of a conversation on a particular afternoon, are less useful over time than the general patterns those specific instances contribute to. You don't need to remember every meal you have ever eaten. You need to have accumulated a general knowledge of your dietary preferences, of what makes you feel well and what doesn't. The brain trades the specific for the general. It discards the raw inputs and keeps the extracted conclusions. This is the strategy of a system built to learn and generalize rather than to archive and retrieve. And for most of what life requires, it is the right strategy. The experiences you've had are not gone. They are distilled into the person you now are, into your preferences and reactions and ways of understanding the world. You carry everything you have lived through, not as a recording, but as a shaping. What does not get subjected to this forgetting process? What gets maintained with something approaching full detail and durability are the experiences marked as emotionally significant. The amygdala's flag protects those memories from the ordinary erasure and leads them to be revisited, rehearsed, stabilized. They become the fixed points of your autobiography. There's a strange irony in this when you think about it slowly. The memories most protected from the ordinary forgetting curve are the ones with the highest emotional charge. The most painful, the most frightening, the most profoundly joyful, the most significant. The ones you most wish you could selectively release are the most durably encoded. The ones that return on their own are the ones that were flagged as mattering. Meanwhile, the ordinary texture of life, the unremarkable afternoons, the meals that were pleasant but uneventful, the days that passed without anything notable, dissolves precisely as the forgetting curve would predict. The neutral material is what goes. What stays is what the amygdala decided to protect. The memories that surface most readily when you lie in a dark room with nothing to distract you are not, usually, random samples of your life. They are the weighted material, the things that carried emotional significance when they happened, selected and preserved and stabilized over time. Your mind, when given quiet and space, returns to what it has decided matters. And what it has decided matters is not entirely within your conscious control. There's something worth sitting within that. The internal landscape you inhabit at night, the memories that arrive uninvited, the scenes that replay, the things the mind returns to when it has nowhere else to go, is not an accident. It is the result of a selection process that has been running quietly beneath your awareness your whole life, deciding what to keep and what to let go. And that, as it turns out, is precisely where the next problem begins. Where were you when you first heard about the September 11th attacks? Most people who were alive and aware enough to understand what was happening that morning can answer this question immediately and in considerable detail. They can tell you the room they were in. They can describe the quality of the morning, what they were doing in the seconds before they knew, exactly how the news arrived, and something of what they felt in the first moments when they understood what they were hearing. These memories feel different from ordinary memories, not just more vivid, different in kind, more fixed, more certain, less like something that is being reconstructed, and more like something that is simply being seen. The experience of accessing them feels direct in a way that accessing other memories does not. Psychologists call these flashbulb memories. Roger Brown and James Kulik coined the term in 1977 after interviewing people about their memories of shocking historical events. The assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, sudden and devastating personal losses. Across these accounts, a consistent pattern emerged. People reported these memories with unusual confidence, unusual detail, and an unusual certainty that the memory was complete and precise. Brown and Kulik proposed that the intense emotional arousal of the moment had triggered a special memory mechanism, something like a neural camera, a now-print command sent through the brain at moments of extreme significance, preserving the experience with unusual fidelity. This account was widely accepted for 2 decades. It matched what these memories felt like from the inside. Of course, a brain shaped by evolution to respond to significant events would have a special mechanism for remembering them precisely. And then the longitudinal studies arrived, and the picture changed. Ulrich Neisser and Nicole Harsh conducted what became one of the most important memory studies of its era. The day after the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded in January 1986, they collected detailed written accounts from participants. Where were you when you heard? Who told you? What were you doing immediately before? What did you do in the minutes that followed? The accounts were written by hand, in participants' own words, the day after the event. 2.5 years later, they returned to the same participants and asked the same questions. The memories had changed substantially. People who had been in a classroom when they heard the news now remembered hearing it at home. People who had been alone now remembered being with friends. People who had heard from a teacher now named a parent, or a roommate, or a television broadcast. The specific content of the memories, not peripheral details, but the core facts of where and with whom and how, had shifted in ways that were often dramatic. And the participants were unaware that anything had changed. They were not reporting revised memories tentatively. They were reporting them with complete confidence, the same certainty they had brought to their original accounts. When shown their handwritten descriptions from the day after the event, some refused to believe the writing was theirs. One participant, looking at her own 1986 account, said, "I know this is my handwriting, and I know this is what I wrote, but I also know this is not what happened. This is not a statement of confusion about handwriting. It is a statement about the overwhelming subjective reality of a reconstructed memory, one that had come to feel more true than a physical document from the original day." Research on September 11th memories, conducted with larger samples and more rigorous methods, found exactly the same pattern. High confidence, high vividness, meaningful rates of change when memories were checked against early accounts, and essentially no correlation between how certain people felt about their memory and how accurate it actually turned out to be. The flashbulb feeling is not a signal of accuracy. It is a signal of significance. Your brain is telling you this moment mattered. It is not telling you this moment is preserved intact and unchanged. Those two messages sound related. They are not the same. Because the flashbulb memory feels so certain, you return to it. You tell it as a story many times to many people. You watched the footage again and again in the days and weeks and years that followed. You absorbed the cultural narrative that developed around the event, the shared account, the iconic images, the things others described. Each retelling is a reconstruction. Each reconstruction incorporated the footage you had since seen, the accounts you had since heard, the things that had been said to you since. The memory grew to include all of this silently, without your awareness that anything had been added. You have flashbulb memories of your own, not of historical events necessarily, but of the moments in your personal history that left a mark. The day something significant ended, the moment someone said something that changed things, the night something happened that divided your life into before and after. Those memories feel the most solid. They feel like bedrock. And they have been changing every time you've revisited them. Not because something went wrong, because that is what memory does. The flashbulb is not a photograph. It is a story you have been telling yourself about a significant moment, and the story has been accreting detail and losing detail and shifting emphasis since the moment it formed. By now, your memory of where you were when something significant happened is a collaboration between the original experience and every version of yourself who has revisited it since. It is genuinely yours, and it is no longer only what happened in the moment. The misinformation effect is the entry point into one of the most important and most uncomfortable areas of memory research. Elizabeth Loftus began studying it in the early 1970s with experiments that were simple in their design and striking in their implications. Participants watched film footage of car accidents, then answered questions about what they had seen. The questions were identical, except for one embedded word. Participants asked how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other, estimated higher speeds than those asked about cars that hit each other. And when participants returned a week later, those in the smashed condition were more likely to report having seen broken glass at the scene. Glass that had not appeared in the footage at all. A single word in a question asked after the fact had changed what participants remembered seeing. Not suggested it, changed it. The broken glass was now in the memory, with no awareness that it had not been there before. Loftus spent the following decades extending this finding in increasingly consequential directions. Misinformation introduced through leading questions, through post-event narratives presented as factual accounts, through the confident suggestions of trusted others. In case after case, the misinformation was absorbed into memory, often seamlessly, often without any sense of having incorporated something new, and later recalled with full confidence as genuine experience. Then she turned to the question that generated the most significant controversy. Could entirely false memories, memories of events that had never happened at all, be implanted in mentally healthy people through ordinary suggestion? She developed what became known as the Lost in the Mall study. Participants were given a booklet containing 4 accounts of childhood experiences, presented as memories gathered from their family members. 3 of the 4 were genuine, provided by relatives. The 4th being lost as a child in a shopping mall, becoming frightened, being found eventually by a kind stranger who helped reunite them with their family, was entirely fabricated. Participants were asked to read all 4 accounts and try to remember each experience. About a quarter of them, across variations of the study, developed some memory of the mall event, not a vague sense that it might have happened. Actual memories with imagery and emotional texture and specific narrative content. Memories of an experience that had never occurred. Subsequent work went further. Memories of childhood hot air balloon rides, implanted by showing participants digitally altered photographs of themselves as children in a balloon that had never existed. Memories of witnessing violent assaults. Memories of embarrassing events at family gatherings. In each case, a meaningful portion of participants developed false memories with the full phenomenological weight of genuine recollection. This is the part that is easy to read quickly and absorb intellectually without fully feeling its implications. So let's stay with it. Your brain does not leave gaps. When it reconstructs a memory and the pieces don't fit together perfectly, when encoding was incomplete, when time has degraded certain traces, when the story has internal ambiguities, it fills the spaces with what seems most consistent, with what fits the context, the emotional weight, your understanding of who the people involved were, and what they were likely to have said and done. These fill-ins feel like genuine memories because they come from the same cognitive machinery. There is no internal label that distinguishes a detail you actually experienced from a detail your brain added to make the reconstruction cohere. Some portion of your memories from early childhood, before approximately age 4, before the hippocampal and prefrontal systems needed for durable episodic encoding have fully matured, are almost certainly reconstructed from what you were told, from photographs you have seen enough times that they feel like first-person experience, from family stories repeated until they acquired the texture of personal memory. You may hold vivid memories of experiences you did not have. You may be missing memories of experiences you did have, but never encoded durably, or never revisited enough for them to stabilize. The stories you know about yourself from very early childhood, most of them came originally from a photograph or from a relative who told the story enough times that it became yours. Many of them feel like first-person experience, but are, underneath, suspiciously similar in structure to the way someone else described them to you. Your autobiography is a mixture of experience, reconstruction, and story. From the inside, all three feel identical. The false memory and the accurate one are indistinguishable in phenomenological texture. They both feel like looking at what was there, which means that the certainty you feel is not a reliable guide to which is which. And that is not a small thing to sit with. What it changes, practically, is not so much what you believe about your past, but how tightly you hold it. You can continue to act from your memories, to use them as the foundation for how you understand yourself and what has shaped you. But holding them with slightly more looseness, slightly more willingness to acknowledge that your version is a version and not the complete and final account. That is a different relationship to the past than the one most of us carry. And it changes something about how you hold other people's memories too. The person who tells you that something happened differently than you remember is not necessarily confused or dishonest or in denial. They are working from their reconstruction, built from their attention and their emotional state and their needs, exactly as yours was built from yours. Both of you are sincere. Both of you are telling the truth as best you can access it. And the truth of what actually happened may be somewhere that neither reconstruction fully reaches. This is actually a more compassionate model of disagreement than the one most of us operate with, the one that assumes the difference between our account and someone else's account must mean that one of us is wrong or lying. The reconstruction model says, two sincere people who genuinely care about accuracy can hold genuinely different memories of the same event, and both memories can be, in their own terms, honest. Understanding this doesn't dissolve every conflict, but it adds some grace to the spaces between people, and some humility to the certainty you feel about your own version of the story. Interlude: the memories you don't know you have. 97:18. Before we reach the largest question, what memory means for identity, there is one more thing worth bringing into the room. Not all of what shapes you is accessible. Not all of it was ever encoded as explicit episodic memory that you can retrieve consciously. Some of what you carry, some of the things that feel most foundational to who you are, your emotional responses and your patterns, and the particular ways you move through the world, was acquired through processes that didn't involve conscious encoding at all. There are things you simply know how to do with other people, how to read a room, how much space to give someone who is upset, when to speak, and when to stay quiet, when something feels off before you can articulate what. These are not things you learned from a single significant experience you can point to. They are compiled across thousands of interactions, absorbed through years of social exposure, integrated into your responses at a level that operates below the reach of episodic recall. You cannot remember learning most of this, not because you have forgotten, but because was never stored episodically in the first place. It went somewhere deeper, into the procedural and emotional systems that run below the level of conscious narrative, into the places where Henry Molaison's hands still knew how to trace the star. This means that some of the most significant influences on who you are, the emotional climate of your childhood, the unspoken rules of the household you grew up in, the way the adults around you managed conflict or suppressed it, the things that were never said but always understood, may not be available to you as explicit memories at all. They are present in your responses, in your automatic reactions, in what feels natural and what feels uncomfortable, but you cannot necessarily retrieve the specific experiences that installed them because they weren't stored that way. This is not a counsel of despair about the opacity of the self. It is something more useful, an invitation to be curious about the parts of yourself that feel most automatic, most simply like personality, most beyond examination. Because if the patterns you live by were built from experience, even experience you cannot consciously retrieve, then they were built. And what was built can, at least in principle, be examined, not by digging for episodic memories that may not exist, but by looking at the patterns themselves with gentleness and without the expectation that every significant influence will have left a retrievable trace. You are more than your accessible memories. You are also everything that went somewhere you cannot directly reach. There is something deeper here than the question of accuracy alone. Something that touches what memory is actually for, and what it means for the self when memory turns out to be as fluid as it is. Your memories are not simply records of a past that exists independently of you, waiting to be correctly or incorrectly accessed. They are the material from which you construct your sense of who you are, the experience of continuity, the feeling that the person lying here tonight is the same person who has lived your life, who made the decisions you've made, who has the history you carry, depends on memory in a way that is almost impossible to fully appreciate from the inside, where memory seems simply to be there, simply to work. John Locke argued in the 17th century that personal identity just is memory, that what makes you the same person across time is the ability to remember your own past experiences. This is philosophically contested, but he captured something phenomenologically real. Memory feels like the thread. It is what ties the moments of a life into something continuous, into a story that has a protagonist and a history and an arc. Which means that when memory revises, when it smooths and edits and updates, it is not only the facts that change. The self built from those facts changes too. Quietly, without announcement, without your awareness. Researchers have documented a consistent asymmetry in how emotional memories change over time. Negative emotional experiences tend to lose their emotional intensity more rapidly than positive ones. The grief softens faster than the joy. The shame fades faster than the pride. The embarrassment of a decade ago has mostly lost its sting. The warmth of a cherished memory tends to remain vivid and emotionally present. Researchers call this the fading effect bias, and it is almost certainly adaptive. An organism that held onto the full acute weight of every painful emotional experience would be burdened in ways that impair functioning. But it also means your emotional autobiography is systematically skewed toward the positive. Your current self, looking back, sees a past that is somewhat warmer and more manageable than the past you actually inhabited. The difficult relationship was harder in its difficult stretches than it now seems. The periods of uncertainty were more frightening than they now appear. The rough edges of your history have been smoothed by a process working silently in the background without your directing it. This is worth pausing on, because it means that when you look back at difficult periods of your life and think it wasn't that bad, you are probably partly right that you survived it, and partly wrong that it was as manageable as it now seems. The person who lived through it was carrying more than the memory you now hold suggests. The fading effect bias is a gift in one sense. It lets you move on, lets old wounds become scars, but it also quietly revises the evidence about what was hard. And that revision can affect how you understand yourself and what you are capable of enduring. There's a corollary to this that is less often discussed. Because the fading effect bias works on negative memories faster than positive ones, it has a tendency to make the past look slightly better than the present, particularly in hindsight. Periods of your life that were genuinely difficult often come to feel, in retrospect, like they had a warmth and simplicity that you couldn't fully appreciate while you were in them. The college years, the early years of a relationship, the decade when you were young and uncertain, but also more alive somehow. The memory of those periods has had more negative material quietly removed from it, which leaves what remains looking warmer and more manageable than the lived experience was. This is not nostalgia as a character flaw. It is nostalgia as a predictable output of a particular mechanism. The past looks good partly because the bad parts have been softened faster than the good parts. And knowing this doesn't eliminate the feeling, but it does invite a slightly more complex relationship with the longing for another time. A gentler, more honest acknowledgement that the past you are longing for may have been harder to live in than it now appears. Your memories of your own life are not simply what happened. They are a particular kind of story, one that gradually smooths and softens certain kinds of pain, that preserves certain kinds of warmth, that shapes the autobiography towards something livable and coherent and forward-facing. This is not deception. It is the system working as it was designed to work. And then there is memory reconsolidation, a discovery that emerged from laboratory research in the late 1990s and has since been demonstrated across many memory systems and many species, including humans. When you retrieve a memory, when you bring it back into active conscious awareness, you temporarily destabilize it. For a window of several hours after retrieval, the memory is in a plastic state, open to modification, subject to new information and new emotional context, before it restabilizes in whatever form it settles into. The act of remembering opens the memory to chain. Every time you have returned to a significant memory, every time you lay awake turning it over, every time you told the story of it to someone who mattered, every time you used it to explain yourself or to understand yourself, you participated in revising it without intending to. The memory that reconsolidated after each return was slightly different from the one that went in, shaped by your current emotional state, shaped by what the telling did to the story, shaped by what you currently need the past to mean. There are therapies built on this property of memory. The reconsolidation window has become a target for interventions with PTSD, using the brief period of plasticity after traumatic memory retrieval to allow something new to integrate into the reconsolidation, not to erase the memory, to change the emotional weight it carries, to allow it to settle back differently than it went in. The past is not fixed. That sentence cuts in both directions. It means that what you carry from your history is not necessarily what happened. And it means that the memories that still have weight, the ones that still arrive in the night with all their original force, are not unchangeable. They are living things. They can be worked with. They can settle differently over time. You are not simply remembering your past. You are in a continuous conversation with it. And in that conversation, both you and the past are always changing. This is not a betrayal of the past. It is, in some ways, what keeps the past alive, what allows it to remain relevant to who you are becoming rather than only preserving who you were. Memory, precisely because it changes, can surprise you, can reframe in ways that release something you had been holding for a long time, can offer new meaning to experiences you thought you had understood completely. Hold your own memories a little more gently when you feel very certain about what happened, especially in a conflict with someone you care about. Let that certainty coexist with the quiet acknowledgement that you are working from a reconstruction, and that the other person is working from a reconstruction too, and that both reconstructions have been shaped by needs and feelings that neither of you can fully see. The oldest, most foundational memories, the ones that feel like bedrock, have been returned to many times. Each return has rebuilt them a little. How much of what you hold was actually experienced, and how much was built from what you were told, may not be fully separable. That is not a reason to distrust those memories. It is a reason to hold them with a little more honesty and a little less certainty. You have been carrying your memories for a long time. Some of them feel vivid and certain and completely real. Some of them feel vague, half-formed, more like impressions than images. Some feel like they happened yesterday. Others feel like they happened to someone you used to be, someone you recognize in photographs, someone whose handwriting you know, but whom you can no longer quite inhabit. And every single one of them has been changing, slowly, silently, the way all living things change, not breaking, growing, being reshaped by every new experience, every new version of yourself that has looked back at the past and made something from what it found there. Tonight you encountered a picture of memory that may feel, at first, more unstable than the one you came in with. The certainty has been questioned. The bedrock has been revealed as something more like living ground, still solid enough to stand on, but different from what it seemed. That is not a loss. The version of memory you came in with, the camera, the file, the archive, gave you something solid to stand on, but also gave you a false kind of certainty. The version you're leaving with is stranger and more complex, and also, in some important way, more honest about what you actually are. A being who is always, in every moment of remembering, also in the act of becoming. The past is not simply behind you. It is active in you, being renegotiated with every new thing you experience and every new version of yourself that encounters it. You don't need to get the past exactly right. Your mind is doing the best it can with what it has, and it has given you what you need. Enough to know who you love, enough to know who you are, enough to find your way through the world with some sense of continuity and purpose. That is enough. Let the certainties soften a little tonight. Let the particular details go. Let your past be the complicated, imperfect, beautifully reconstructed thing it has always been. Tonight, your sleeping brain will do its quiet work, replaying the traces of the day, reinforcing what mattered, releasing what didn't need to stay. It has been doing this every night of your life. It will continue tonight without your help. You can rest. The memories will still be here in the morning, a little different, a little more yours, exactly the way they have always been. Good night.